All right, episode 23, the Average Joe Sports Show. Chris Schmidt. Signing day is here. Nebraska has a big name already on board.
It's Mitch Sherman. In case you haven't heard, that big name set to sign with Nebraska on Wednesday is Dylan Raiola.
Hi, it's Bill Doleman. Casey Thompson, is the doctor in?
It's Elijah Herbel here. All this recruiting news has put volleyball on the back burner, but we are going to hit a disappointing Sunday national championship match for Nebraska against Texas.
With you, it's Average Joe Sports Show podcast time. Chris Schmidt, Mitch Sherman, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, episode 23. Make sure you subscribe to the AJ Sports Show on YouTube, where you can watch it, Spotify and iTunes for the audio version of the download, and follow us on Twitter at AJ Sports Pod. Anything happen on Monday of this week, fellas? Anything good?
I'm not aware of anything that. Kind of a slow day on the sports calendar.
A little bit,
yeah.
2 days before signing day.
I did see a story trending on the New York Times written by Mitch Sherman.
Okay.
Seems to have caused quite a stir.
Mitch, what did you write?
Well, I don't know. I'm coming out of a fog. I was under the weather. Fortunately, it didn't happen to me on signing day, but I did get hit by some kind of a sickness early this week. So whatever I wrote yesterday, I'm taking no responsibility for it unless it's something that Nebraska fans are celebrating, like the commitment, the expected commitment and flip of one Dylan Raiola, the 5-star quarterback from Buford, Georgia, and Phoenix / wherever else. He's Burleson, Texas, Detroit. He's well-traveled. Well-traveled, and the next stop is going to be Lincoln, Nebraska.
Pretty big news. 5-star quarterback, Nebraska fans elated. Of course, Coach Rhule and his staff doing fabulous work, and we've led up to this for about a week. Once the smoke signals started coming in on that, there's a chance he may be defecting from Georgia, and things came together for Nebraska. Of course, family ties are key. We all watched Raiola's announcement video on Instagram. His dad was featured on it, and kind of a family feel for Raiola to land in Lincoln, and it really gives Nebraska a shot in the arm, Mitch, with just the caliber of player that comes in. And, as you wrote, I mean, the impact for the Big Red is immediate potentially, but it kind of mushrooms out in a great way with just a perception standpoint with this program.
Yeah, I will say I did not write that yesterday, even though it published yesterday. So the story was in the bank, which tells you a little bit about how I think most people around the Nebraska program felt about Dylan up until the time of his commitment. And it's a good thing, because I don't know that I could have put two words together 24 hours ago when this thing went down. But yeah, Chris, you're absolutely right. This is about more than one player and one position seemingly on the way to being fixed to now in that quarterback spot. Of course, we talked about it all through the season, how much trouble Nebraska had getting that right. And Dylan Raiola doesn't walk in on January 5th or 6th when he shows up and fix that on day one just because he's here. But he goes a long way toward getting Nebraska right at the QB spot. And part of that is his presence will attract others to come and contribute on the offensive and defensive sides. He makes Nebraska a better football team without throwing a pass. And I think that's something that can't be overlooked in this discussion, is just what kind of credibility him signing with Nebraska lends to Matt Rhule's efforts to rebuild this program.
And Chris, I like the term that you used with this, with Dylan Raiola provides Nebraska a shot in the arm, but this isn't your average run-of-the-mill shot in the arm. This is Steve Rogers, Captain America, super soldier serum shot in the arm. This is an absolute game changer for Nebraska in terms of what this does with the program trajectory, to have a quarterback of this caliber on your roster. And it's not just what he does at the quarterback position. It's kind of what Mitch alluded to. It's the national attention that it brings to Nebraska and the perception-changing nature that it has for not just fans, not just national media, but the current crop of 14 to 18-year-olds, your future Nebraska Cornhuskers, the guys that are just starting to make an impact on their high school football team right now, and Matt Rhule is going to be finding him here in the next 6 to 12 months. That's what this has a really, really huge effect on, is those guys saying, well, the number one quarterback in the country picked Nebraska. Why shouldn't I pick Nebraska?
Think about him.
After some lean years, this continues Nebraska's 61 or 62-year run as the off-season national champion of hope in college football. Lean years, the last 20, that's for sure, but people still maintained hope. But this is a moment that I think justifies people's faith and passion for Nebraska football, that things will turn around. And this is a big deal. It's tough to go back in time and say, how does this compare to Turner Gill, because that was grainy black and white video. I think that you saw Turner Gill playing rarely. Tommy Frazier, people read something called newspapers back then and might see a couple of highlights, but I think everybody seems to feel like they've grown up with Dylan Raiola the last couple of years, and it's been well documented. Where he has gone, where he has committed, where he has played, how he has done. And for it to come to fruition after such a long dance, if you will, I think it's a really big deal. And I don't say this lightly. It's a big deal for Nebraska football. It's a big deal for Nebraska athletics. It's a big deal for the entire University of Nebraska system, the city of Lincoln, economically. You don't want to put it all on one kid, but you do put it on the emotion and the investment that people put in Nebraska football. And it will pay off. I mean, literally pay off next fall and for the next couple of falls because of the attention that this has generated.
Let's not put it all on one kid, but it is a big deal for the United States of America.
Well, he just said Captain America.
It's a great moment in this country.
I was just going to go there, though, of let's not all put it on one kid, but is there one kid? Mitch, I was just diving back into your story from this spring last night after the commitment, reading through that yet again and kind of getting the backstory on Dylan, refreshing myself on that. And is there a kid out there in the high school ranks of America that is more equipped for that kind of pressure than Dylan Raiola? And you never know what happens until you really put a kid in that moment. But this is a guy that's been, really through most of his life, been prepared for this moment by two fantastic athletes of parents, the mentorship from NFL quarterbacks. Again, I don't want to say this kid's going to be impervious to the pressure, but I would think you'd struggle to find somebody out there among the high school ranks that is more prepared for this kind of environment that he will have at Nebraska.
Yeah, we talked about this last week, and the comparison I think that we agreed on, and he's not in high school, but he was a year ago, was Arch Manning. And, he's waiting his turn at Texas. It's going to be a different path, most likely, for Dylan Raiola at Nebraska, just because of the situation with the two programs. One is a college football playoff team right now, and the other's coming off 7 consecutive losing seasons. But it's few and far between the number of players who've come out of high school in recent years, or really at any time, who are ready to step in and handle what a college environment is going to throw at them. He's ultra prepared from that perspective. Just to keep it in perspective, I did notice a tweet from my coworker, Bruce Feldman, in lavishing Dylan Raiola with praise from his experience watching the quarterbacks at the Elite 11 finals this summer. Bruce made note that 30% of the 5-star quarterbacks in any given class end up working out and playing like 5-star quarterbacks in college, like a Trevor Lawrence that worked out, or something, maybe a little bit below that. Dylan is viewed as, I think just nationally is viewed as someone who has a much greater chance to beat those odds than most of the players who come out of high school with his resume. So that in itself tells you what Nebraska's dealing with here.
Here's another reason why I say it's a big deal for this fan base, this state, this university. We've all walked around Lincoln before games. You go back 30 years, and it was in Lincoln just alive. It didn't matter if the kickoff was at 11 a.m. or 7 p.m. I mean, it was a really, really big deal. The last few years, when you make that walk from downtown on campus to get to Memorial Stadium, there's been a little resignation, kind of a formality, kind of a, well, this is what we do. But I got to believe that when the spring game rolls around and the show that they will put on for that, that'll be a production now. But can you imagine what game day is going to be like when Nebraska takes on UTEP week 1, when Nebraska takes on Colorado week 2? I mean, the energy that this news, and again, not all on one kid, but I think it kind of goes back to people have felt really good about Matt Rhule over the last year. And I think that's really, kind of an umbrella over this that will protect Dylan Raiola from, all of the pressure that he is the only one. I think Matt Rhule's done a pretty good job establishing the program. The Tony White re-signing and extension is a huge thing for all of this, for that defense to be able to take another step or two forward between now and next spring. But I'm looking forward to making the walk from downtown to the stadium and just feeling the energy and the excitement and the anticipation for Nebraska football on a Saturday that has, quite frankly, been waned and lost over the last few years.
And one thing that you guys don't get to see because you're down at the stadium, I'm always, at some point early in the fourth quarter, hopping in my car, flipping on the radio, and driving over to the station to produce our post-game show following the game. So you guys don't get to see this, but I always remember from my childhood, like the Bo Pelini years, even before that, the Callahan years, you drive around Lincoln on a Saturday, especially during the game, the roads are empty. It's not ghost town, but it's not an average Saturday in Lincoln. That's gone away in recent years. You pull up to traffic lights and you're sitting behind 2-3 cars and you go, what's going on here? It's the middle of the fourth quarter. Why are you people out driving around? I know why I'm driving around. Why are you driving around? That buzz is not there. And don't get me wrong, it's still much less traffic than you'd have on a normal Saturday, but it's not the same as it used to be with Lincoln felt like a ghost town on game days. No longer. And maybe it will now.
You know what's going to be striking, and of course, we're taking a leap here and saying that this is all going to work out and that Dylan is going to be healthy and all that we expect him to be from day one. But that's the conversation that we have in December, 9 months before the football season starts. What's going to be striking is the number 15 jerseys that are on that walk from various buildings downtown over toward the stadium. And I'm sorry if you don't know what that means, if you're not old enough to know what that jersey means in Nebraska history, but I'm not talking about Willie Miller. No offense, or
Ferragamo,
Malachi Coleman,
Malachi. Oh boy, how's that going to work? How is that going to work?
I've wondered.
Throw me the ball and I'll give you the jersey.
Yeah, Malachi's a very giving soul, and I think maybe he's going to give up his jersey. Dylan had the number 15 jersey in his commitment video. He wore it this year at Buford. But if you're coming in with the guy on the offense who wears that number, that'll be an interesting conversation. We'll maybe ask Matt Rhule about that on Wednesday and whether Dylan was promised number 15.
Malachi, work hard. 7's available.
You can get a single digit jersey, or maybe Raiola will get a single digit jersey as a true freshman. And this whole nod to Tommy Frazier is going to be out the window. But that's what the Nebraska program does. Is it it gives those single digit jerseys to the toughest players on the team. But Nebraska program is also one that has tremendous history and likes to put its history out there. And if Dylan wants to wear number 15, then I think he's probably going to wear number 15, and it's going to harken back a whole lot of memories to the last true freshman who had anywhere near the kind of hype around him that this guy has.
And here's a slight problem with the numbers. I was talking to my buddy Graham, who he's currently a student at the University of Georgia Law School. And so whenever he gets time, he does tune in.
How are they taking it?
Not well. Like they've left for campus. He's texted around to some of his buddies. They're not taking it great, just to let you know. But I was texting with him, and he's like, as soon as I get my hands on a number 15 Nebraska jersey, I will be wearing it around campus to see what response I get. And here's now a problem. If Dylan's number's up in the air, that plan goes out the window. You're going to have to wait until fall to know what number he's going to wear, and maybe it changes after his freshman year.
You got to wait until fall to troll, huh?
Yeah. But that's the pot with NIL now. It's not just the 15. You can have Raiola on the back in the NIL era now, too, and it's all well and good.
Well, I didn't see any 15 jerseys being sold last night when I was out doing some shopping. So it hadn't quite hit the marketing, although I did see some T-shirts today for off-season national championship 2024.
Pretty good. Big day for Nebraska. Dylan Raiola committing. As we kind of wrap Dylan and look at the class, guys, to a man here, are you surprised this actually happened? Reading Dylan's poem with his announcement, then the commitment video, he talked about home, that feel. How big of a lift do you think this was for Nebraska? Because, it was a winding road to get to this landing spot.
I think it's a big deal.
It's a huge deal.
Will it have an immediate?
Surprised it happened.
No, I'm not, to be honest with you. I'm a little surprised that it came back early last week. That was a little surprising that, it's back in play. But once it became back in play, then I thought this is going to happen. Because as I said on your show last week on Hail Varsity, I think that this has been a lifetime journey for the Raiola family. The fact that Dom came here from Hawaii and had a great experience and has always maintained ties with Nebraska. His wife, holds Nebraska dear to her heart. Dayton, Taylor, the other kids. I think that this has been the culmination of probably where he always wanted to end up, and maybe felt some pressure, like, oh my gosh, Ohio State wants me. This would be great, and then that would be great for him and the brand. And then Georgia, oh my gosh, Georgia wants me. But in reality, the heartstrings have always been pulling him back to Nebraska, and that this is home for Dylan and the Raiola family. And I think Dom let him make that decision, knowing full well that this would probably make the family very happy, very proud. But I think that this has always been home. And when it came back to the headlines last week, I'm not surprised that this is where we are.
And one of the things that I think we kind of forget about, Mitch, and I want to get your take on this because you kind of hit on it in your story from this past spring, is the impact of his mom in all of this. Because everyone talks about Dom. Dom's got the NFL pedigree. Dom's one that played at Nebraska. But his mom felt very connected to Nebraska as well. And let's not forget, she was a pretty good athlete in her own right. If there's anyone that Dylan got his arm from, it was probably his mom.
Yeah, Dominic likes to say that the boys who are both quarterbacks, Dylan and Dayton, got their arm from Yvonne Raiola, who was a water polo player and a swimmer at the University of Hawaii, and grew up, in the same region as Dominic. Of course, that's how they got together, and the rest is history, as they say. But yeah, she's quite a contrast to Dominic as far as the personality goes. He wears it on his sleeve, as you know, from his time at Nebraska, from his time with the Detroit Lions, an emotional player. Dominic talks about having productive paranoia as a part of what drove him in the NFL. And I would say at Nebraska too, but when we talked about it, it was more in the context of his NFL career. He feared every year coming into training camp that he was going to get cut. And that's what drove him on a daily basis. And, Yvonne, in talking to her, I get the sense, and we actually talked about this exact idea. She's more of the calming influence. Dominic is always going to be pushing his kids to work, and it isn't that. Yvonne has a type of work ethic too, but they're a good mix of the two of them. And Dylan and Dayton, and I don't know Taylor. She has played volleyball at TCU. I think is on the move from there right now. But I did talk to her last year or early this year in putting that story together. I don't think that they inherited everything from their dad that made him great. They didn't inherit that productive paranoia. They're a little more laid back their approach to life and their approach to sports. And they, without a doubt, got that from her. So it's a good mix that we're seeing here, in the forefront as Dylan makes this choice.
It's Mitch Sherman, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt, the Average Joe Sports Show. Give us a subscription on YouTube. The AJ Sports Show is where you can watch the episode 23, and the AJ Sports Pod. Give us a follow on Twitter, Spotify, and iTunes for the audio version. Let's look at the class as a whole. And Nebraska's in a bit of a numbers crunch, fellas, with this class and just numbers overall. And that is interesting when we talk about the topic of Casey Thompson on top of portal acquisitions moving forward for this upcoming season. In the high school class, Mitch, Nebraska knocked it out of the park, presumably, as we talk, about 12 hours before signing day. With the in-state gets, because it was a bumper crop in-state for Nebraska this year. And Danny Kaelin, let's start with him, staying solid to Nebraska.
Yeah, he had the opportunity to go visit Michigan State, the quarterback out of Bellevue West, last weekend, and stayed home. He had to work through his emotions and feelings after Nebraska got back in with Dylan Raiola, and that's not an easy thing because Danny, has been kind of paired with Dylan from the very beginning, from the time that they were on campus together for the first time back in 2021 after their freshman seasons. And Danny stepped aside a little bit as Nebraska put all of its recruiting efforts at the QB position into Raiola after his decommitment from Ohio State. And then when Dylan pledged to Georgia, Danny was quick to jump and take that spot. So, for a week before signing day, to have Raiola come back into this, it really made for what I believe was an uncomfortable situation for Kaelin. And, he hasn't said anything publicly. He's been quiet on social media except for tweeting out a pro Nebraska GBR message last Friday night when his QB coach essentially announced that Danny was solid to Nebraska, and a video of him throwing with Davon Hall and Thomas Fedoni at the Warren Academy in Omaha. Danny's gonna sign at Bell West with his two high school teammates, Isaiah McMorris and Hall, on Wednesday morning. And I think it's one of the more compelling storylines in this class. Just to I want to hear what he has to say about how this whole process went down, because he was so instrumental in not just fixing what Nebraska had needed at the quarterback spot in this class with his commitment in May, but also in bringing in so many and helping bring in so many of the big names in this 24 group, including Carter Nelson, the tight end out of Ainsworth with the crazy stats. I saw his stats. He posted them on social media, and granted, it's 8-man football, but his stats are beyond video game like in what he did this year in Ainsworth. And also, Danny was instrumental in helping Nebraska land Grant Bricks. Those are the two top-rated players outside of Raiola in this class, both top 100 players from within driving distance of Lincoln, and they may not get either one of those without the work that Daniel Kaelin did. So, the story of this class, again, Raiola aside, it starts at home with Nebraska locking up the in-state talent and getting Grant Bricks out of Logan, Iowa. And then I think the other storyline is all of these sons of former Nebraska players. You have the sons of Neil Smith and Kenny Clark, and of course Dominic Raiola and Damon Benning and the great punter Sam Cook, who are all signing with Nebraska on Wednesday. So that's quite a storyline in its own right, just that they have continued these legacies.
And that's another great job by Matt Rhule and his staff to make sure that those legacies feel comfortable sending their sons to the program. Because
Right.
If you go back in recent years, that hasn't always been necessarily the case. And there have been some great players in this state and players with familiar names, and they've ended up elsewhere. And there was a disconnect. And perhaps maybe disconnect's not the right word. Maybe wounds is a better word. But the connections are being remade and the wounds are being healed. And for the number of the lack of players who have jumped into the portal right away at Nebraska speaks volumes. Players coming back for an extra year of eligibility when they could have departed and gone up perhaps to the NFL. That speaks volumes. Now, there will probably be some attrition after spring. That's, just the natural evolution of things in this era of college football. But, there's a lot of panic down in Georgia, not just because of Dylan Raiola, but there's several players down south who have left Kirby Smart's program for one reason or another. And other programs, and Nebraska's not had that attrition, and instead, legacies are willingly and wantingly to have their kids go play for Matt Rhule and the Husker program. I think it speaks volumes to the changing culture that Matt Rhule has put together, and that even a player like Danny Kaelin, I do want to give this a shot, at least now, and maybe he'll stick with it throughout his college career. Who knows? But it's pretty impressive to me.
Quite an all-star list of former Huskers. I mean, that you laid out there.
It's not any normal group of five, is it?
No. I mean, it's a wow factor when you think of how great these players were at Nebraska and then how impactful they were in the NFL. I mean, it's incredible. And, if Nebraska can be a hub again for a second generation, that is music to Matt Rhule's ears. Let's talk about the quarterback room. We've hit on Dylan Raiola, but the topic of Casey Thompson, and, when we started this quarterback discussion a couple episodes ago, the thought was, all right, get your elder statesman from the portal, and then you
Joe Flacco.
You groom the young guy. McCord has landed at Syracuse. But Casey Thompson is back in town. Casey Thompson, it sounds like, could be mulling over an option to be in that quarterback room again for Nebraska. I mean, Casey's he's got his undergraduate, he's got his master's, he's working on his doctorate, and there are resources here at good old Nebraska U to make things happen, even if there's maybe not a scholarship spot.
Yeah, this seems to be kind of the underground conversation about Casey Thompson. Nothing official from him. Obviously, nothing official from the university. Matt Rhule's pretty transparent. I would imagine he'll get asked about it on Wednesday, and he'll probably be open. And it's no secret that Casey's been hanging out here. He's posted videos on social media, so you might as well answer the question about whether this is a possibility. And it looks like it is a possibility. For all of the excitement that there was around portal quarterbacks 7 to 14 days ago, it would sure be something if Nebraska ends up landing Casey Thompson out of the portal as a seventh-year senior who's 25 years old and has already started one season with the Huskers to come in and be some kind of a mentor and provide depth behind what would seem to be a true freshman starter. There still is a spring to play out, and Chubba Purdy, Heinrich Haber are still in this program. Danny Kaelin's not going to take anything laying down and just let people walk over him. But we can kind of see the writing on the wall, and the direction that this QB group is headed. And, I think if anybody's position in that group is clear going into 2024, if Nebraska has all of these figures, the role that Casey Thompson would play in that mix is the easiest one to figure out. He's there because of his experience, because of his leadership ability, and his ability to, if coaching is in his future, what better way to start than to go into it and be a mentor for the number one talent to come into this program in decades.
A walk-on doctoral candidate at Nebraska will be the possible backup quarterback to a 5-star.
Sounds like a 30 for 30 story.
This is totally a 30 for 30.
But like in a different world, like some just doctoral candidate off the street comes in and walks on and ends up being the backup.
Whose dad played at Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And wants his kid to go back to Nebraska to play for Matt Rhule. Casey, did you get your paper in? I don't have a paper to do. I have a dissertation that I'm working on.
And depending on who you want to listen to, I think that this narrative can be put to rest now. a guy who got run out of town by Matt Rhule 9 months ago. That's not really the way it went down. Clearly Rhule left the door open, or maybe leaving the door open is not the right way to describe it. He didn't burn any bridges on the way out, as Casey Thompson opted to go into the portal and played last year before he was hurt at Florida Atlantic. He went out on good terms with Matt Rhule, or he would not be even considering this kind of a move.
And one of the things here with this narrative is it kind of strikes me as something we've heard about Matt Rhule all along. He's going to shoot you straight. And that's what it sounds like last spring was between Matt Rhule and Casey Thompson. It's a guy coming off of injury. Hey, you're kind of behind the eight ball here in terms of coming off of injury. You're going to have to go win the starting job. And if I was you, going into my final year of eligibility, I wouldn't be going into a place where I'm behind the eight ball, needing to come from behind to win the starting job. It's a guy that shooting you straight is, by all accounts, what it sounds like. You can talk about the talent evaluation side of things, but it's always been said, Matt Rhule shoots you straight. And that's kind of what my read on this situation is Matt Rhule just gave Casey Thompson the honest truth about his standing, about where he was in this program, and said, legitimately, if I was you, I'd go find a spot where I have a guaranteed place to go play football in my final year of eligibility. Whether NFL's on the table or not, you want to be playing. You want to be on that football field. And I think that's how that conversation went down.
And regardless if he plays, you get the sense that he knows if he comes back here, he'll be treated well. He'll enjoy the year. The fans will be great to him. It's a place that a kid from Oklahoma, played at Texas, feels comfortable, feels welcome. And that kind of goes back all the way back to the beginning of the show. It's why the Raiolas are Nebraska has a special place with them. They know how their son and they will be treated, and everybody else seems to believe that too.
And obviously, this is not a set-in-stone thing as right now.
No,
we're talking
but it's fun to talk about.
On a Tuesday afternoon. I'd like to think that this was made by fan social media buzz, that Casey came back to just visit some friends in Lincoln at the end of last week, and then the fans start going crazy on Twitter, and Matt Rhule sees it and goes, wait, can we do that? Would that work? Just calls up Marcus Satterfield. Hey, I got a crazy idea that the fans are throwing around right now.
Get Dr. L's on the phone. Let's see what we can create in the lab.
Do you still have Casey Thompson's phone number? That's how I just envision this going down, which would be awesome.
I'm pretty excited, just as much of a football nut as Casey is. From a film standpoint and a prep standpoint, the professional approach he's always had in his career. I mean, that is monstrous for this quarterback room, whoever's leading it. And I think that can only help Nebraska if it's a true freshman that's starting, if it's a guy in Chubba Purdy that sticks and stays and fights for a job, or if it's Danny Keelan, whatever the situation is. And I think we all lean towards Dylan, of course. But to have an older brother, so to speak, right there that has been through – how many systems has Casey Thompson been through? Texas, new offensive coordinator at Texas, Nebraska in the Whipple years. Then you go to Florida Atlantic because his OC from Texas went to Florida Atlantic, and now he's back in Lincoln. And he had a little bit of an introduction, you would think, before he hit the portal with Nebraska's system. Yeah, I think he knows the offense. He knows the language. So that's a kind of a kickstart to his GA years if he wants to be a GA and a college football coach. And, you get one more rodeo potentially to take snaps and throw touchdowns.
Remember, when Casey was at Nebraska in 2023, it had not switched yet to the option. It was not a team that had gone, full 1983 on their scheme. Not 1983 on the amount of points scored, but
no.
On the scheme and what Nebraska wanted to do with its QB run game and the play action pass. I mean, this was still Marcus Satterfield's South Carolina offense. That was some fun and gun aspect to it. And they wanted to run the ball, and they're going to continue to want to run the ball. I think we should point out that because things are changing with the kind of quarterbacks that Nebraska signs this week, and Raiola and Kalen, who are not option quarterbacks by any stretch, they're mobile enough to move the pocket and stretch out a play. But the QB run thing is going to be a thing of the past. But that said, Nebraska will still focus on running the ball. Nebraska, as long as Matt Rhule is the coach, is going to prioritize running the football with its running backs. And, that is the system that Casey Thompson spent 4 or 5 months learning under Marcus Satterfield and Matt Rhule before he hit the portal last spring.
Maybe he's coming to Nebraska to work on his doctoral dissertation on the offensive complexities and similarities in the 21st century, circa 2023-24.
Spoken like a true sportsman.
Yeah, there we go. That works well. It works well. Speaking of running game, is there a surprise in Matt Rhule's back pocket, either via the portal or in the from the high school ranks? You mentioned run game, Mitch. Does Nebraska have a dude right now at running back to bolster this run game? I know they've got some guys returning from injury. I know you've got Emmett Johnson,
who I thought was great, by the way.
I want to see more Emmett, but it's been a long time since Nebraska's had an Amir type guy. You know what I mean? That difference maker at running back, that All-American.
Yeah, those guys unfortunately don't just come. They don't grow on trees. There was some. There's been some talk, of course, about Nebraska going into the portal, and I'm just looking this up right now. Dante Dowdell is the name, who's in the portal as a freshman running back out of Oregon, originally from Mississippi, but looks like maybe he's just projected to go to Mississippi State. I don't believe that Dante Dowdell has yet to pick a school. Let me look that up while you guys.
He's supposed to visit in January.
According to both On3 and 24/7, there is no commitment yet.
Yeah.
Okay. Don't you think Nebraska has some sufficient stablemates, shall we say, in the running back room?
running backs.
Serviceable.
Yeah,
they love Gabe Ervin and they love Ramir Johnson, but both of them are coming off of significant injury. I think that's the drawback for those two. I thought Emmett Johnson was fantastic when given the opportunity and did not have much drop off from the time he took over the job to the end of the season. And I think that Emmett Johnson has a very bright future in whatever that Nebraska wants to do. Maybe their answer at running back is already here, but I think with Ervin and Ramir, it is the injury, the coming back from the injuries that they had, which is the cause for concern as to just how good that running back room is. But I think if all are healthy, that's a pretty solid group, right?
And there's Quentin Ives, who redshirted this year out of New Jersey, who's a bigger back, more in the mold of not as big as Ervin, but height-wise, he's more built like Ervin than he is like Ramir Johnson or Emmett Johnson. Yeah, I think it's easy to look at that room, and Matt Rhule talked about not selling short the roster that you have and remembering to appreciate the players who are here. The running back room is a good case study to put to use in with that kind of philosophy. So they don't have to go to the portal, but there's been enough smoke, I think, around names that have come up in the portal at the running back spot. Earlier there was Trevor Etienne, the back who's Travis Etienne's younger brother. Trevor left Florida. He has landed elsewhere. Well, I believe in the SEC, not coming to Nebraska. But as these names have come up, Nebraska's gotten involved, at least in the discourse publicly. So I think that there is an interest on Nebraska's part. In fact, I know there's an interest on Nebraska's part in bringing in another running back. Probably not going to be from the high school ranks at this point with signing day upon us. Maybe there's still somebody out there in February. Occasionally you can find something like that, but more likely going to have to come from the portal. And I think the big thing in assessing the room that's returning is, as you mentioned, Bill, two of these guys are coming off significant injuries. And it's not the first injury for either one of them, for either Ramir Johnson or for Gabe Ervin. So there have to be questions going into the spring, at least, about what you have in these two guys and their durability. And, that would lead me to think that they're going to be active in pursuing someone from the portal.
It should be noted, Trevor Etienne does not have a transfer portal destination just yet, but there is a strong assumption out there that he will land at Georgia. That's what all indications seem to show. So he does not officially announce that just yet, but does appear that is going to be the case. There is a name out there in the transfer portal, though, that we haven't talked about here. Guy that hasn't picked a destination yet. Jeff Sims. No, I can't even do the callback back to 2 months ago to put in Jeff Sims at running back.
Well, you wanted him to play running back for quite a while.
Could work.
I think I'm more in line with the Harburg back to H-back tight end than you are for Jeff Sims being a running back.
No one
second that. Guys, let's shift over.
Real quick about the running backs too. With Irvin and Ramir Johnson and the injuries that they have, you would have to believe that they will not be full go in spring. I would think that there would be some limitations as to just how much they put them through. So that is going to be a drawback as well. It's not as though, they were injured early in the season, but hip surgery and Ramir was at his shoulder. You're not going to put them through a full 100%. We're ready to go and see what you can do spring session with those guys. And I would not be surprised if they have no contact at all, and you don't see them return to contact until next August. So that'll limit them. And who knows also, Chubba Purdy, if he did have the surgery, how that went, how much he'll be able to do in winter conditioning and in spring ball. I would assume that he's going to want to go, but can you afford to do that with any of those players who had much talked about injuries last season?
Yeah, I think that groin surgery that he had is maybe an 8 to 12 week recovery, so he should be okay. He'll have a green jersey on. I don't anticipate him getting hit much, if at all, in the spring. But he could feasibly be ready to go with the running backs. You're absolutely right. There's no way they're putting Irvin and Ramir Johnson out there to take hits with everything that they've been through, just for load management standpoint, even if they're feeling good.
Well, Danny Nee Day is going to be a real thing as we talk Husker hoops. Impressive finish to the non-con for Fred Hoiberg and company, dismantling Kansas State. You get the big win a couple of Sundays ago against Sparty. Nebraska at 9-2, North Dakota State, or it's North Dakota, forgive me, North Dakota, coming in midweek this week for Nebraska. But Danny Nee making a surprise phone call to Coach Hoiberg's radio show, and I think we all smile when we hear of and hear from Danny Nee, covering Danny and just those golden years in Nebraska basketball with old Danny working the barroom floor at Barry's, and all of a sudden Steve Schmidt's taking us to Kemper for the Big 8 tournament in the early 90s.
Elijah, you have a confused look on your face.
I was wondering where Schmidt was going with that, but we got there in the end.
No, about Danny Nee, a confused look, like as he says, we all remember those years with Danny out there on the court. You maybe don't remember those years.
No recollection. That's why I was wondering where he was going with it.
When I think of Danny Nee, I think of Bob Devaney, just because as great of a hire as Coach Devaney did in giving the football program to Tom Osborne. Let's face it, he probably had a lot more fun after hours having a drink or two with Danny Nee, that they could talk shop a little bit differently than he did with Tom. But, that was such a high personality hire for Nebraska athletics that I'm not sure that, Nebraska's ever had before, other than Devaney, and ever had since. And it'll be great to see him come back to town, and there is no question about it. Those folks who do remember will welcome him back, despite that, there was the other call to a radio station when he said we've never, felt welcome here, and thought he was going to take the Rutgers job. That's so much water under the bridge that the water's dried up by now. And, of course, I just brought it up. But people will welcome him back, and that will be a fun week, whatever it's going to be.
People should go, and I'll give a little endorsement here. People should go in anticipation of Nee's return on January 20th and read the series of stories that Dirk Chatelain wrote in the Omaha World Herald a couple of years ago about the Danny Nee era. And, I lived through the Danny Nee era. I came into school in Lincoln that 93-94 season, which is the season that's being remembered here on this reunion. I'm not sure why they're choosing to. It's just the fact that it's been 30 years, but that was a 7-7 team in the Big 8, and maybe just the personalities. I don't know.
They won the Big 8 tournament.
That was the Big 8 tournament win. Yes. All right. So there you go. That explains it. Beat Oklahoma and number 1 ranked Missouri and on back-to-back days, I believe. And you had Pike standing on the scorers table at Kemper Arena. See, I have a memory of it.
No, because Pike went off for the
42.
Yeah, 42, the all-time Big 8 scoring record for the tournament. And then didn't they whack Okie State in the championship?
It could have been Okie State in the championship.
Yeah, but it was a run, and it was another good team. But Nebraska was always kind of that fringe 8-9 seed, right? And then they got bumped up to a 6, and then Michael Jordan, not that one, and Penn broke our hearts.
Oh gosh, yes, I remember watching that in the dorms and. My freshman year, that was devastating. Mm-hmm. Penn, you're thinking Ivy League. Okay, this is going to be it. Nebraska's going to get over the
drop 85 on you.
Yeah. So I mean, you got Pike and Strick who are right around here, and they'll be the
Chubbuck,
hosts, I guess, of the and Chubbuck is in Omaha too. So I look forward to that. I'm going to have to make a trip to PBA just to see that group, see Mikey Moore.
Yeah.
Terrence Badgett. So
that was such a fun team. They had a lot of talented freshmen. And I remember I have such fond memories of Nebraska basketball because Dad had season tickets, and my brother and I'd always have a draft every fall. Who got to go where? We'd flip a coin for who got to pick first, and it was always KU. I'd always win, man. During that era, I'd pick and I'd get KU. And he'd be stuck with, well, I'll take Oklahoma. It's like, dude, they're going to be bad this year, but you go right ahead, Missouri. I mean, so we'd trade off all the home games. And no, we had such awesome seats. And then there was a little bit of moment of greatness where Danny's talking to Dad. And then as I grew up, Danny was super, super great to our college radio show. I mean, he'd pop in studio from time to time.
I hope we get to see Jeff Smith out there.
Jeff Smith, I love Jeff.
You and I have talked with Coach Smith in the media room at PBA before events, I know, and so he hangs around, and he was an assistant along with Gary Bargan and Jimmy Williams on that team. Just a lot of names that are bring back memories. Do you know a little bit of trivia here as I look at the schedule of that team? And it did beat Oklahoma State in the final after OU and number 3 ranked Mizzou. That was 3 consecutive days against those teams. Wow. Do you know where the first round of the NCAA tournament game was played, where Nebraska was taken out by 11 seed Penn?
Was it upstate New York?
Yeah, the Nassau Coliseum in Uniondale, New York.
Okay. How the hell did you get that? I have worked with you long enough to we said this morning in the morning show. I've worked with you long enough to not argue with you on dates or scores or anything like that. How the hell did you pull that one out?
I just remember it.
Oh my God.
Probably wanted to make a road trip up there knowing you.
I did. I could not talk Mom and Dad into going. We were a year early on the Big 8 tournament trip. Rumor may have it that Dad and a couple of famous Huskers the year before maybe closed a bar down, and Nebraska didn't have a great opening round 10:45 tip-off against Kansas State. But Nebraska took their revenge the following year and won the Big 8 tournament.
I couldn't even tell you where Nebraska played Baylor in 2015.
It was in San Antonio.
God damn it.
How do you get just to bring this back real quick, and you and your trips, the Raiola family has requested that Chris not travel to road games. That's part of the commitment deal. So just want to pass that along to Husker fans that Schmidt will be bolted to a chair.
I was in Iowa City 2 years ago, and it worked out okay, but 1-9. So, Nebraska volleyball, guys. Let's wrap with greatness, true greatness as Nebraska volleyball. What a season as we wind down this episode. But a tough one. How good was Texas? How good was their run through a Stanford, through a Wisconsin, and then through Nebraska? I know it's tough for Nebraska fans to give accolades to Texas, but wow, pretty deserving of back-to-back championships. It was going to be tough for Nebraska on Sunday against Texas, but Texas made it look, dare I say, a bit easy, and that's not easy to do to Coach Cook and this team.
Yeah, the serving was next level, and that was the story of that championship match, Texas was able to do what it wanted from the service line, and Nebraska didn't have an answer. Passing broke down, and once that happens in volleyball, it just tilts the scales vastly in favor of the team that is knocking those serves right where they want. So you saw it happen early in the second set when Nebraska took a lead, and they put Asia O'Neal back at the line, and she just rolled off I think it was 11 consecutive points, and it was really over then. That's the part that kind of surprised me, I guess, most about the match, is that, I watched Nebraska this year play at Penn State when it went down 2-0 and then come back and win the next three, and thought, okay, well, there's definitely some fight in this team. And it wasn't that the team lost its fight. It was that Texas was playing at that high of a level, or serving at that high of a level. And it helped Texas's offense, because Nebraska was constantly out of system and just sending balls across the net, allowing Texas to set up its offense in a way that was not the kind of challenge that Nebraska wanted to give them. And when you have a couple of attackers like O'Neal and like Maddie Skinner, who's now won 3 national championships in her career, 1 at Kentucky and 2 at Texas, there's just not an answer to have. And it was unfortunate to see it on that stage. And, with ABC, national TV, and all the buildup to that match, it was unfortunate that Nebraska wasn't able to put its best foot forward in that championship match and make it an epic competition. But the season, I think is going to build into next year, and they're going to be a group that's the majority of it is back. All their starters should be back, and I think that there's an opportunity for this story to be one that's over 2 years. And you'll look at that at the way it ended in December of 23, a year from now, and say that's what made them great.
And for the first time all season, not being on the court, I can't truly speak to this, but for the first time all season, you saw a young team allow that self-doubt creep in. Like, that Husker volleyball team saw what Texas did to Wisconsin. They won that match in the exact same way at the service line. I mean, simple. Serving and passing is how they beat Wisconsin. It's how they beat Nebraska, too. And in that second set, from my outside perspective, you could see that self-doubt creep in and really sabotage a young team. And now the question becomes, what do they do in an offseason to combat that? What do they do in an offseason to come back? Because it's a rough time for that self-doubt to creep in for the first time all season. Even whenever they went on the road to Wisconsin, that didn't feel like a moment where self-doubt crept in. That felt like a team that had locked up its share of the Big Ten title, and some things went Wisconsin's way, and they didn't have the same fight that they had the rest of the season. Whenever they went and lost that first match of the year to Wisconsin, whenever you watch that title game on Sunday, that was a team that just looked like it doubted itself. And that's a rough time for that to happen.
There was a moment early on in the first set, in fact, the first few points, when it seemed there was just something in Nebraska's body language. And I cannot remember the national championship match that Nebraska played in, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. John Cook called a timeout like after the first point or two in the match. And it was really kind of a startling moment, and Nebraska ended up losing. And I just watching and seeing the body language on the first few serves, it seemed like Texas was coming out fearlessly. They had been on a roll. They survived the match against Tennessee. They win on the road at Stanford and dominate that regional, and then doing what they did to Wisconsin. I didn't think that they could have that kind of performance again, but they were fearless. I'm not going to say Nebraska was fearful, but it did look like the moment was very big, and Texas, with the experience that it had, matched it. And they were confident in their serves. And it's in volleyball, serving is a little bit like when they talk about free throws in basketball. You got to make your free throws. You got to serve the ball well. And it sounds so fundamental, like, well, yeah, just get the ball over the net. But yeah, shoot it from 15 feet and swish it. If you don't serve well, you don't win. And Texas's serves were aggressive. They were like attacks. And then by the time they got all that momentum in the second set, unfortunately it was over. But I said this also on I think it was on your show last week, Schmidt, on Hail Varsity. I think this Nebraska volleyball team is the most important volleyball team in the history of the sport. because of what it did on Volleyball Day in Nebraska, attracting so many people, A, to the stadium, and B, the millions who either watched live or watched videos in the subsequent days, weeks, and months since then. The fact that they set attendance records in every venue that they walked into during the course of the season, the attention that team got as a home team or a visiting team, they became a household name. It's the biggest volleyball entity on the globe. The interest that they brought to the sport of volleyball this year has never been done before. So I think this particular Nebraska team is the most important ever.
And John Cook will want to capitalize on that momentum. He's never one to sit still. That's what he's done throughout his career, is when you think that they've gone as high as they can go, he always wants to take it a step farther. So, I think we'll hear announcements this offseason about directions that the program wants to go. That championship match aside, you'll hear about things that he wants to do, places that he wants to take them, that continue to put them in a place where they are, the carrying the flag for the sport, so to speak. Now, Texas has won 2 national championships in a row, and they deserve all the credit they're getting. They were by far the aggressors on Sunday, but Nebraska's has a distinct role in the landscape of this sport, and nothing about what happened in Tampa is going to change that.
It's Mitch Sherman, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt, episode 23 in the books for the Average Joe Sports Show. Thanks for checking us out. Subscribe the AJ Sports Show on YouTube and give us a follow on Twitter, the AJ Sports Pod, Spotify, and iTunes as well. We'll talk to you next time.